Well, kia ora, no mai haere mai, and welcome along tonight on behalf of Gisborne District Council. A warm welcome to each and every one of you. And it's for this presentation regarding Let's Talk rates, as well as an opportunity for you to ask your questions and have them answered by members of the team here. Do we know how many people are on the live stream, Ree? Still streaming, okay. If you're watching the live stream delayed, we have 4 attendees here in the audience as well. So tonight we're going to share with you. It's working? Would you maybe fix it? Yes, it's on. Just one technical glitch. We will get there. Let's give that a try. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So tonight we're going to share with you why the council has reviewed the rating system, why changes are being proposed and what those changes are, and what impact they will have if they're adopted for ratepayers in the region. Also, as I mentioned, there will be time for Q&As at the end. And of course, I'd like to invite you to stay, have a tea, coffee and a bicky with us and ask any questions that might come to mind post the presentation. I strongly urge each of you, if you have not done so already, the council has created an online rates tool which you can go on, type your property address or valuation number, and you can see what the proposed changes, how they would impact your property. This tool does compare your property rates to those of the 2019-2020 valuation. That's simply because of when the modelling commenced. And the other things that need to be overlaid, and it's just where we are in a point of time, would be property revaluations that come out towards the end of the year, and any changes taken on board or adopted as part of the long-term plan, which council is just starting to engage on now. So just to bear that in mind if you're looking at that rates tool. And one final thing, it's all GST exclusive numbers also. If your rates are proposed to go up or down, it's just as important for you to provide your feedback through to us, and to make that feedback count, we ask you to make a submission. So again, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can jump online in the convenience of your own home at Let's Talk Rates, or we do have some computers here tonight which we can assist you with that submission process if you like. So before we start the presentation, I'd just like to invite Ree to say mihi.
Kia ora tātou, kua hui mai nei ki tēnei wahi, ki te kōrero ngā kaupapa. Ka nui te hare mō tō koutou kai ngā kau ki te aro mai, ki te tautoko i ngā take e pe ana ki tēnei rohe. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thanks, Ree. I'll invite the members of the team here so you know who's speaking with you tonight. From the council, we have Pauline Foreman. She's our Chief Financial Officer. Fiona Scragg at the end is the Revenue Team Leader. Over to the far table, Louise Carlisle is the Senior Systems Accountant. Ree, who you've just met here, is the Executive Advisor. We also have here tonight the Director of Community Lifelines, Dave Wilson, sitting over by Lou, and Joe Noble from Strategic Planning. And my name, I've met a couple of you on the Saturday drop-in sessions, but my name's Kyla Peterson and I'm the facilitator this evening. As I mentioned, we will have time for your questions. If you're online and watching and you'd like to submit a question, please email the feedback@gdc.gov.nz. Ree will be monitoring the email for you, so we will be able to answer your questions too. Because we are live streaming, if you're asking a question, I will need to put a microphone in front of your, in front of you. And that's purely so those participants on the live stream can hear you, otherwise it gets very difficult. They won't be able to hear what's been asked. So if you could just be a little bit patient until I get the microphone in front of you. They'll hear? That's worry. Okay. And if we have so many questions, we don't get to them again, for anyone in the room, you can email the feedback email as well. Right. So you may be asking, why the heck, why has this review come about? What's happening? Well, there's been two main drivers as to why the rating review has occurred. The first one has been regarding the community feedback that has been received into council. The second main reason is it falls into part of the long-term planning process, which, as I mentioned before, council is just starting to engage in now with the community. So those are the two main drivers. So I will then pass you over to Pauline. Excuse me, no, I won't. The review isn't something that has been done really quickly. It's a very long process. It happened many months ago. And through that process, council has considered and looked at, who's paying, is the way the rate's being shared at the moment, is it the right way? If we made some changes, what would that look like? And looked at how it would impact different ratepayer groups. And as part of that process, as the modelling was going through and the considerations being given around guiding principles, themes started to percolate through. And there's three key themes that came about, which Pauline will share with you and take you through those proposed changes that were a result of trying to address those key themes.
Just as Kyla mentioned, we do it also because every 3 years we're required by law to review how we fund activities. And this review, we went back to basics, and it was a principle-led review. It was also to align with our 30-year strategic objectives as outlined with the Te Rāwhiti 250 spatial plan. Some of the new principles we identified included that all funding options should consider affordability, that funding choices will support the outcomes of Te Rāwhiti 250, that each generation should pay for the services they receive, revenue collection will be obvious, transparent, efficient, simple, and consistent. Actions and inactions that adversely affect the community, environment, or community assets should be considered to be paid extra. Users of the service can expect to contribute to the cost of the operating service. From this, it was identified that there were areas within the current rating system that were no longer fit for purpose. They actually didn't align to the new principles, or there were inconsistencies with our other rates. The review showed that there were three main issues. The first issue was the principle of affordability, or the ability to pay rates. The current rating system has a high proportion of fixed rates, meaning everybody pays the same amount. This impacts low-income households more than it does for higher income households. This effectively is a regressive tax. It's a bit like GST, where the tax is applied uniformly, taking a larger percentage of income from low-income earners than it does from high. The second issue was around road maintenance and who should pay. Currently, the level of forestry harvesting and the increased usage of heavy vehicles on our roading network means that council is spending more of its roading budget on repairing and renewing the roads used by forestry sector, much more than what it used to. The last issue is around infrastructure maintenance and who should pay. We refer to infrastructure as water supply, wastewater, and stormwater. Stormwater is the water that runs off impervious or the water-resistant surfaces such as roads, roofs, driveways, and footpaths. And the runoff itself goes down drains into the stormwater pipes or channels, and it carries it to the nearest waterway. So there are proposed five main changes to the way that we allocate rates. It should be noted that the proposed changes doesn't mean we collect more rates. We still collect the same amount, but what would change is how it's allocated across ratepayers. The general rate changes recognises a public good component, where some of the costs of these services can't be attributed to a particular group of users. The changes also addresses consistency of how other rates are allocated. The roading rate is the change with more costs being set to recover from the forestry sector to meet the costs that have been identified from repairing damaged roads. The wastewater allocation only affects those ones that are connected to it. So if you have your own system, it won't affect you. It's mostly within the city. Stormwater is changing it from a per fixed rate per service property as to a SUIP, which we'll call per household. But there is another slight change with the stormwater, and that is there's been an extension of the boundaries around the city, moving out from where they are before. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. The last one is to actually remove the city centre management promotion rate. So this one here, it shows where the movements have come from in different sectors. So we can see that there is an increase in the forestry sector, but a corresponding decrease in the residential sector. Most of the changes arise from the reallocation of how the roading rate is collected, with more coming from the forestry sector. This reallocation of the roading rate, in effect, reduces the subsidising that the residential ratepayer that occurs within the current rating system. And what I mean by that is that the residential urban ratepayer pays around currently 60% of the roading network costs, but only contributes about 20 to 30% of the wear and tear. So the first thing about the general rate. With the general rate, that's the rate that's applied generally, meaning every ratepayer pays. This is opposed, obviously, to a targeted rate which targets a group of ratepayers. The main changes is that the 10% of cost for wastewater, water supply and stormwater will be collected generally. Currently, the stormwater is at 20%, but for consistency of these rates, it's proposed to reduce down to 10%. In addition to the maintenance costs currently rated for coastal maintenance, it's proposed to actually move that to a general rate. The costs for these activities is consistent with how we rate activities that benefit the whole community. Also, it actually supports the principle of affordability, where low-income households has less ability to pay rates. So the current rating system doesn't recognise the benefit provided to the whole community by the delivery of the free waters infrastructure, and it's actually inconsistent with other activities. The benefits relate to improving and maintaining water quality, protecting water bodies and coastal rivers that have important ecosystems, recreational and cultural values, and moving towards a more efficient and a sustainable use of fresh water. This recognition of benefits is also supported by the central government recent water reforms, where the emphasis was on how these three activities will be managed and provided to all communities. It is appropriate for general rates to partially fund activities where there is a provision of a private good, but it also generates wider social and cultural well-being benefits, or when the application of fees and charges causes affordability issues, or it compromises the wider objectives of the activity. And this is consistent with the general guiding principles of affordability. So is this consistent? We do have already general rates, and the two flood protection schemes have 60% applied generally as across the districts. Sorry, I've gone a little bit too fast there. But those that are closest to the rivers has always been recognised that they would have the best benefit, but there are greater economic and environmental well-being for the whole community, which is why it's 60% general rates. So I'm not sure whether we've got too much from the forestry sector and things here, but I'm going to actually explain some of the rationale. Because it's live streamed, it also can be as a point of reference going through for anybody else coming on to the discussion. So there are two main changes with the forestry roading rates. It is increasing the amount collected from the forestry sector from the current differential from 7.5 to 10. And we're changing the definition of forestry for rating purposes. Currently, forestry for rating purposes is defined as exotic forest land, which is the highest and best use of land on any one individually owned property. However, there are other properties such as horticultural and pastoral, which may have blocks of forestry land, but don't get rated at the higher differential. So the current definition is to say that any blocks or any land that is over blocks of forestry over 20 hectares is captured. Effectively, this is about 139 properties that will be captured under this new definition. Getting to more technical things with regards to it, probably that you don't want to know, but in terms of the roading rate, it's two, and this is how you would see it on your own rate demands, it's two parts. So one part is that 24% of it is actually opposed to every single ratepayer in what is called a uniform charge, because it's uniformly at a fixed rate. And that's about 100, and you can't, it looks like the dots come there, it's not 11,000, it is just about $118 per property. The next biggest part of it is the differentiated targeted rates, which is the biggest component. The targeted rate is based on those differentials according to land use. Different land use activities cause different heavy vehicle movements and impacts on the road. So the residential ratepayer at 1 times, it says it has the lowest impact on the road, but the forestry at the highest. At the moment, it says 7.5, but we propose to go to 10 times. The current rating system is based around rates as a tax, and that the principle that actions that causes damage to the council assets can expect to pay more. All forestry rating units, whether waiting for planting or in mid-harvest, are paying a share towards today's damage. What we are proposing is that the rates collected from the forestry sector should align to what the forestry sector is causing damage on the roads now. It should be noted that we actually don't rate in advance of the costs. We're only collecting for what, not collecting for the future, we're only collecting for what's being incurred today. As the roading rates is a tax, we're allocating this on the basis across the forestry sector. Can't see the top of the things, but so what is this? Why we've got a difference? And it's a little bit hard to see because we've lost the top part of it, but this is showing the impact of the horticultural pastoral, the amount of tonnes transported per year, as opposed to the forestry. And that's where we have got the differentials imposed. So from this particular one, this actually says how, the blue line says how much of the tonnes of logs that are going to the port over the last 10 years. And in between that is showing that there is a relationship to the differentials is when we actually have increased the amount of multiplier, or we call differentials, have gone. So we've got a 4 times, a 5 times, 7.5, and now because it has gone, the actual amount of tonnes to the port is increasing, it's going to a 10 times. We had a report but independently reviewed that the last 10 years, and it noted that the local share or council's costs for forestry was estimated to cost about 1.8 million over the last 5 years, and that the future costs when we start in the LTP for the first year in 2021 is going to be at least 2.3 million. Up there on the graph, there says that the average cost collected is 1.8 million, sorry, average cost incurred is 1.8 million over the last 5 years, but we've only collected just under 1.2 million over the last 5 years. So also should note that the lag between the higher differentials when they are applied, what I mean by that, the 7.5, which is way out onto the other side, was applied in 2019. But the total rates collected from 7.5 times was only 1.63. Still a shortfall of what we needed on the average of the last 5 years of 1.8 million. Effectively, over that period of the 5 years, there's a shortfall if the forestry was paying the costs of what was incurred of over $3 million. These business as usual costs doesn't take into account what we should be doing, such as resilient works. A Maven report in 2018 said there is still an estimated 5.25 million worth of unfunded maintenance works and renewal work required on our bridges, as well as 8 million worth of resilient improvements. In road maintenance and renewals, there was also a backlog of 6.8 million. Obviously, to collect this on a rating system, it wouldn't be affordable for forestry owners when they're waiting on their income. So we have to look at other options. What the rates talked about so far is what is appropriate amount in the future for rates needed to be collected from the forestry based on the current business as usual damage to the roads. It's not talking about resilience. So in this end, what have we been looking at? Is it all we've been looking at is only the rates? No, it's not. Joe's actually going to talk about other things that we've considered and what we're still working towards to capture the increases of the heavy commercial vehicles on our roads, with the increased logs going to the port, and how we fund future costs for the resilience backlog. Pass it over.
So I'm just going to briefly talk about other options we looked at in terms of funding the roading maintenance and renewals. So of course we looked at the status quo. So under that, the forestry differential continues to be 7.5, which means the non-forestry land uses continue to fund some of the roading maintenance that's directly attributable to those heavy vehicles used by the forestry sector and don't see a reduction in their roading rates. It also means that those forestry activities on horticultural pastoral land don't contribute anything extra to pay for the damage caused by forestry trucks. We also looked at some other rating options. So we looked at maybe splitting the roading rate between urban and rural ratepayers based on the expenditure on roading in each of those zones. But that was not preferred because it doesn't recognise the benefit that everyone in the region receives from having a roading system that functions effectively as a network. So then we looked at non-rating options, and this is sort of the future that Pauline referred to. So there are a couple of options that came out of that process as being potential options for the future. That includes charging a financial contribution as part of a resource consent process. For example, when someone applies for a consent to harvest their forestry, or some type of heavy vehicle levy that could be imposed by way of a bylaw. And that levy could be charged based on frequency of heavy vehicle movements or volume, and that would capture things like logging trucks. Unfortunately, sort of implementing either of those options isn't straightforward because we need to go through a separate consultation process and submission process, and also need to really carefully think about what the charge should be and how it should be calculated. But in the future, they do provide alternative options to collect money from the forestry sector and other heavy vehicle users in a way that more closely aligns to their usage of the network and when they're more likely to be generating income. It also provides a mechanism to allow for additional investment in the roading network used by heavy vehicles and increase the current level of service. But I do note we're also dependent on the level of funding we receive from the New Zealand Transport Agency, because that affects how much work we can do as a council, because they part fund the maintenance and renewal of our roading network. There are currently situations where road users such as the forestry sector do enter into agreements with council to either fund or undertake maintenance or upgrades to particular parts of the road network so that they're suitable for heavy vehicle use. And we expect that that will continue to enable forestry harvest to occur, particularly in some of those more remote parts of the network. We did also look at a regional fuel tax, but that's not actually an option under the current legislation, so we didn't pursue that any further. Costs for the sewage network, thank you, that have been applied. The allocation of the cost for wastewater is consistent with the way water and stormwater activities are also applied. Just going to pass over to Fiona, who's going to take you through the mechanics of it.
So what we have in front of us is an example of how we're currently rating. And we have a uniform connection rate for the supply of wastewater service and a toilet pan rate for the wastewater network. The first line is a single household and line 2 is a multiple household. The single household property currently contributes more. This is inconsistent with how we rate other infrastructure activities where those who get the same service should pay the same price. So this is what we are proposing. With the changes we are proposing, the two wastewater rates would be merged into one. The new pan rate would be higher than the old one to make sure we're still collecting the same amount of money, but it would be distributed differently. This change would mean everybody connected to the wastewater network would pay the same per household. All residential households only pay for one toilet pan, even if you have more. This is a legislative rule. So the houses where you may have a toilet that everyone can use and an ensuite, you'd still only pay for one toilet. The proposed change would increase rates for multi-unit residential properties and non-residential properties with multiple toilets. This change does not affect any properties that are not connected to the wastewater. Stormwater rates. Need you back to Pauline.
Thank you. Welcome over. So this is basically changing it from a per. Thank you. Said, and it's consistent with water supply. But there is also an extension of the city stormwater infrastructure boundary from where it is to line with the growth of the residential and lifestyle blocks around the city. The proposal is similar to with the wastewater rate, and the change will change the cost of stormwater from those receiving the same service. It's consistent with all three waters: wastewater, water supply, and stormwater. As noted before, the stormwater boundary has been extended to align with the growth in the residential lifestyles around the city. I'm going to have some maps that are shown around here. A bit hard, and even later on you probably can go up and see it, but I'm just going to get Fiona to explain in more detail of where the stormwater boundary was, where it is looking with the proposal that it takes, and a little bit of the differences. Through the map? No, just if you take the map.
Have you got a microphone if we, does it matter? You've got to use the microphone. So these are the stormwater maps for our region. This is the whole region here, and what it shows is that there is the city, which is this area right down here in black, and we've got it blown up here, which is on urban stormwater, and then we've got some rural areas that are on rural stormwater. We've got Hicks Bay, Te Aroa, Tiki Tiki, Ruatoria, Waipiro Bay, Tapuia Springs, Tokomaru Bay, and we've got some areas around Tolaga Bay, and then around here we've got some out at Wainui and Okatū, Matawai, Tikaraka, Motu, and Manatuki and Paratahi. The blue area is our drainage scheme, so it's showing that we've got drainage schemes that are operating in the areas as well. So you might want to come and have a look later on if it interests you. So like I say, we already have stormwater rates in our rural towns and in our city. We are also proposing to extend the area of the targeted stormwater rate. This change could potentially include areas around the city like Markraka, Nelson Road, Cameron Road, Matokitoki Valley Road, Riverside Road and the Darwin Road area. As Pauline indicated, this would align with growth of residential and lifestyle blocks around the city in places where there may be a need to increase the infrastructure. As you can see in this example, a residential property in the city with 2 households is paying $80.50 per household. Oops, I'm on the wrong one. I haven't got the beeper thing, sorry. $80.50 per household, and this is less than the neighbouring property with a single household paying $161, even though all areas are serviced by the stormwater network. By changing how we rate for stormwater from rating per property to rating per household, it would mean all households would pay the same rates for stormwater services. Both properties would pay $161 per household for the stormwater service. In the rural areas, the stormwater rate is a lesser amount, half the amount of the 161 in the rural towns up the coast. We would not be collecting any additional money because of this proposed change. Commercial and industrial properties would continue to be rated on capital value for stormwater. So that's just covering off the stormwater. City centre management and promotion rate. So the proposal is to remove the rate for city centre management and promotion. In all the other rates we've covered so far, council has proposed reallocating rates. The proposal in this instance is to remove the rate. The rate has been in place for approximately 20 years. The way we manage the city centre and promote businesses in Tairāwhiti has changed. Currently, Trust Tairāwhiti provide the services for this rate. We have been discussing with Trust Tairāwhiti whether the current rate is fit for purpose or whether this is currently out of date. Does it meet with the needs of our businesses contributing? Is it static? There have been changes to the location and nature of our businesses. The ideal rating method would be agile and capable of capturing businesses that are benefit regardless of the location. Is the rate targeted correctly? The activity does not benefit all contributors to the rate. It also may be benefiting some businesses outside the targeted rate area who do not contribute. And is it sufficiently funded? Trust Tairāwhiti believe the rate provides insufficient funds to effectively achieve the objective of this activity. We have the opportunity to consider new and improved ways to support and promote businesses in our region. The City Watch, also known as the Business Area Patrol, which includes supporting the CCTV or the crime prevention cameras services, would continue to be supported by council. And as we develop the long-term plan for 21-31, we have the opportunity to consider council's role in economic development and promotion and tourism and the amount of funding that may be needed. And I'll hand over to Joe, who's going to talk about Māori land.
So this is just a little piece about Whenua Maori or Maori freehold land. So we know that there are some sort of unique challenges that face Maori landowners in terms of developing Maori freehold land and generating income, which in turn makes paying rates a difficulty in some instances, and that can have a negative impact on our Maori landowners and also be a disincentive to further economic development and use of that land. So government did introduce some legislation into Parliament earlier this year. It's called the Local Government Rating of Whenua Maori Amendment Bill, and that was intended to address some of these challenges that have been experienced by Maori landowners, but unfortunately that legislation didn't make its way through Parliament before it wound up for the election period. So we don't know when or if the bill will be passed. So therefore staff here are looking at options to address the current challenges through changes to the rating remission policies. So those policies set out when and if council can consider waiving some of the rates that apply to a piece of land. And there are some specific policies in there that apply to Māori land. So some of the things council staff are thinking about in conjunction with councillors are how we can better support development of Whenua Maori, and also how we can recognise the important role that Papakaina housing plays in our region. So we're intending to engage with Māori landowners on these changes either later this year or early next year. But I'd just encourage anyone either listening or in the room, if you have ideas for changes to the policies, then let us know. You can let us know via the feedback@gdc.govt.nz email or have a chat with us today.
Thank you. So we're now at the stage where if you'd like to ask your questions, I'll bring a microphone across to you and we'll have one of the team here be able to provide an answer. Who'd like to start? I'll sit here.
Yeah, thanks. The question I have. What's that? Come up there.
You feel like
Yeah.
going for a little walk?
I'm not shy.
Or bring your seats around if you like. Yeah.
The question I have is for our neighbourhood, is rural residential, right? We're already paying stormwater in the general part. Is that going to stay?
So part of what we said that there will be a part of it, but it would be halved.
The amount that we pay, we only pay, what is it? Round figures, $36 a year.
Yeah, so there'd be $18 or something
Right.
that you would pay towards that part.
Yeah, that's the stormwater.
That's a stormwater.
Oh, beauty, because
But there's two parts where we were talking about it. And this is the part where people, if they're around those areas where they've extended the boundaries for the city, and which is where we had those minute. And I'm not sure where yours are, but you may be connected with that. Whereas before you didn't have the targeted rate, which was only in the city boundaries. You now may be captured where it has moved out slightly from what it was.
well, we're
before.
actually Goodwin Road.
Goodwin Road?
There were areas, rural residential use, I think you've got a letter about the stormwater specifically.
Yeah.
So yes, you would be one.
Yeah, so what it looks like we're here on, and by the is $158. Well, we're refusing to accept that.
So part of the submission process, and this is where we come
Yeah.
back and listen to it, is
Yeah.
there's three things that are coming out from this that we've been hearing with it. And one is that the extension of the boundaries for the wastewater, the signalling, that it actually has moved where it was before.
But can I just explain this? The wastewater of ours goes into our tanks for stock and all that. And then the overflow, that goes down the paddock into like if it's a real storm, into soak pit.
So there's two options that we're looking at for the stormwater. Well, three actually. One is the proposal. Two is that in some of the areas where it is extending, the actual network is extending, but it's perhaps not the same level of service as ones in the city. But in the rural areas, they're getting that kind of the charge, but it's 50%, it's half the charge of what the city actually charged. So that's the second proposal. The third proposal is that we don't extend the boundary now, but as we're doing more work and moving that infrastructure wider out into the other areas, that will be when it will take into account. So there's three options. So your submissions are important because we capture it in there and we have that as part of the overall process. So they're the three things. One is what's on what you've received. Two is, does it reduce level of service, which is out of the
Well, I
rural?
don't know on that one there, whether it's, where it comes. How far up the Riverside Road does it go? Okay, well, we're further, right up the top. Well, we're off Riverside Road, yes. So, but, so basically I can tell the folks that in our area up there, that because it's all farmland, well, the bulk of it's farmland.
So we can capture that with yours with the details as a submission that you don't agree with the extension of the boundary, and we'll put it in. But we see that there is a strong emphasis, and there probably will be the three options that would be given to when councillors consider that, and anyone who's submitting it as well, that it's not extended now, but it needs to signal that it will be extending the boundaries.
And when that happens, we'd have a say, would we?
Yes, you do.
Right, okay, that's good. Okay, now roading. It's a big thing, and I realise it's really expensive. Why is it the council turns around and has got these guys coming up and down every day, up past our place and back twice a day with a truck, and we're paying for it?
So in terms of that,
This probably doesn't come under.
the rates is probably, if there's a particular service or noise or things that are coming with it, we can perhaps take that details and
No, there's no, we're not worried about the noise. It's just, if we're paying, roading tax, why should we be paying an increase? When I honestly believe that it's just a waste of money.
So
with what's happening.
So is yours a forestry block?
No, sheep and cattle.
So more likely than not, because of that, the forestry blocks will pay a greater share and you'll pay a lesser share with regards to that. So we're saying that...
There's basically no forestry blocks up the top now.
Right. So in terms of, from the roading, when we're talking about it, is we're still collecting the same, we've got to collect this amount, but we're saying who pays for that rate changes. And we're saying because of the more damage that's out on the road for the forestry, we're saying that the forestry land owners will pay more towards those costs.
I accept that.
If I can just jump in there, because roading's one of my areas here at council.
Pardon?
Roading's one of my departments in council, so roading reports to me eventually. One of the things I'd say that's really difficult if you're me is not all of the roading workers here work for council. So some of the ones coming up and down can be doing it for a whole range of people. You said you're on Goodwin's Road?
Yep.
All of them are GPS. I have a look and see what they're doing going up and down. So I'll ask my staff, because they're not supposed to just drive up and down roads for the sake of it. Yep. So the ones that we control under our council contracts, that's different. Here. Yeah, we've got some that we control as council. However, Downer, Fultons, a lot of them do work for other people other than us too. They don't work exclusively for us.
I'd rather not mention names. Yeah.
I can look. I'll have a look at it.
So, no, otherwise, I don't think there's anything else. But we are not happy with, if we've got to pay this because we get no services. We've got our own sewage, everything.
The one that's there's the stormwater, so I'm not too sure which one you're actually referring to. There is a slight charge with the 10% on the, what they sent you. The stormwater is mostly on there.
because it's misleading that it says renewal, you know. If it-
Yes, your main impact was the stormwater, was the, most of the stormwater on the roads, yeah. So that was the one where we said that the boundaries were increased there, but as part of this is a proposal submission, do we increase those boundaries as what we've proposed, or do we just hold it until the actual, at a later date?
And then we can go against that at that stage.
Yes, you can.
That's all right. Yeah, no, okay, that's all. Thanks, girls.
I can bring the microphone to you, or you can come on up.
Scary. Okay, I'm Pat Collins. I live at 72 Main Road, Markracker. And I'm just confused when it says in the letter from the Chief Financial Officer, that's yourself, is it? Yeah. Okay, it says that does not pay rates on stormwater services.
You do pay some of that general rate, that 20%, but what this was referring to more is the targeted portion of the stormwater. So yeah, you do pay a contribution like everybody does generally,
Yeah.
20%,
Yeah.
but not that was to the targeted, the city connection like in each of the townships. But now it's saying that that boundary had increased with the areas of increased residentials going out into the rural area, and that's what it was suggesting with the proposal.
Okay. Now, I'm surrounded on Parkers Lane and the racecourse side of my property. I'm surrounded by mainly logging contractors who have a hell of a lot of stormwater runoff. My property has the Carlin drain going through it on the Parkers Lane side, and that runs down into the Hanson drain. This is what my property looks like in the wet. This was in May 2011. That's my property that goes down to the Carlin drain at the bottom, and then it runs into the Hanson drain. It goes along between the racecourse and our place. And that's what it's like every year. What happened was there was a 7-acre block on the right-hand side of my place between us and the racecourse, and that was subdivided by Eames, and 2 new houses were built, like 2 blocks or 1 hectare, I suppose, blocks were put in. The road was, they put a drive in and to service the 2 properties. That rose by about a foot on the racecourse side of my property. And that's where the bulk of that water's coming from. When it rains, that's where it goes. I've got like Thompson's contractors on the, they're at 76 Main Road, Markracker. Well, he's got probably 5 big, huge sheds. There's a hell of a big runoff there, like the water, the tanks, or the 1 tank he's got would be a 14,000 litre tank. There'd be a hell of a lot of runoff off that. And that goes to the lowest part, which is my place. Now, that stormwater goes into the Hanson drain, but into my property that didn't have a drain on the right-hand side, on the racecourse side, that I put in at my expense. That's taken some of the stormwater away, but not all of it. But I can't understand when council make a subdivision, like subdivide. I thought there was a submission. The neighbours, the people that had a boundary to that property, would be able to put a submission in to say, okay, yay or nay or whatever. But there was never anything, and those people were never enforced to put a drain in to protect my property and plus other properties. So I'm just, you know, that's what I'd like to know. But I'll put a written submission in as well. Yeah. But you know, it's crazy because their place is dry, and our place is a pond. You know, so that's my gripe. And yet here we're looking at sharing a stormwater rate with the people that are causing the stormwater to be there.
What we will also do, Pat, is raise a request for service to the stormwater area.
Yep.
So that one of the engineers there will give you a call back about the issue and see whether they can make any difference, whether there's something more that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, you see, way back in the plan, like the annual plan, Robert Budd, I think it was doing it at the time. Remember, there was the 2012-2022 plan. This was all sorted, was supposed to have been sorted. But, and is this the same as what we're working with now? Is that the same plan, or is this a new plan? Different one, yeah.
And we'll come into a new one.
Yeah, because this was Mark Ricker drainage investigation. Robert Budd and Peter Higgs is the Deputy Chief Executive at the time, and said that purpose of this report is to provide feedback on stormwater investigation. The outcome of the investigation found that a limited number of stormwater improvement work are required in the area. The improvement work is expected to be able to be completed this year, utilising existing maintenance budgets. No, it gets cleaned out. The drain gets cleaned out. The Carlin drain gets cleaned out once a year. And by being cleaned out, I'm saying it's sprayed. It's not actually deepened or anything like that. And that's my gripe. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You want to hang on to that or what? Oh, yeah, sure. I think I've got some scribble on there. Yeah, okay, righto.
What one of you lovely gentlemen would like to speak next?
I got a text message about 3 weeks ago, and it read, if I had 4 eggs, a thief gave me 3, and the rooster laid 7. How many eggs would I have? Well, last Wednesday, 16th, just under 2 weeks ago, I got a personal letter from the council, and I think it's what I just said about the eggs. It's about as silly, and if not more stupid than what the egg thing was. It's about the toilet rates. If you got 5 people in a house, family, and you got 2 toilet pans in 2 buildings, how is 5 people going to on your sewerage network overload it because you got 2 pans and 1 family in there? And the other silly thing is stormwater. You might have 2 buildings on a catchment of the rain. You might have an 80 square metre 3-bedroom house on it and 30 square metre room to sleep in. Gives you a catchment of 110, but the average house may be 125, 300 square metres. So that does not make sense that you should come down on the people with two buildings, small buildings compared to a big house. So the toilet one is absolutely stupid anyway, because with 5 people, they can't, as you got signs around the street, put pee in paper. You can't put pee and flush the toilet more with 5 people because you got two buildings on it. And that to me is absolutely foolish. And your calculation, what we're paying now with uniform annual general rates, with one household, you're paying $5.43, And I thought I was pretty good at maths at school, but then you got for 2 households and on there, you got the same connection fee or rate as $3.50 and the pan rate of $1.93, and it looks like what you've done is added those two and taken off one household and come up with a figure of $2.72. I don't know what sort of sense that calculation makes, but I think you just, well, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me. And I sort of came for this letter, but I see some figures up there where in 5 years you got 6.5 million own on your calculation on the wall tonight, and must be millions and millions of dollars you're not getting on rates. Why aren't they chased up? And the other thing is, I'm not a racist or anything, but Maori land, the chiefs signed a treaty with the Crown that we move forward as one. Why is there special conditions up the coast? For up the coast now, there's multi-million industries on honey and manuka oils, and they seem to get exemption where in town it's not. So anyway, I've put a remission on this, and I hope it doesn't go any other way, but so that's my gripe. And I also like to say that I did put I collected a thing for Amber Dunn's thing, but I've pulled away from it because I've met a gentleman with the same values of mine, but he's certainly into tourism and fishing, but I reckon I'm a better fisher than him anyway. But so I've pulled away, and I just hope Frank Murphy might come through and have quite a bit of say in the council. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a couple of things with it. One of the examples that we give for 1 household, 2 households, there was a bigger issue associated with the way the wastewater is. And what we were finding is 1 household was paying the same as in the extreme example was at the retirement villages where there may be 170. So that 1 house was paying the same fixed charge for the connection as what the 179. So it was looking at making sure that fixed rates where it was causing an affordability issue and not a uniform or an appropriate measure of the costs associated with it. So that's where the most of that has come into it as account. There are ups and downs. There are a number of households that only have 1 or 2 people as opposed to 5 or 6. You're quite right. There are ups and downs within the whole the network of wastewater. The other part that you raised a little bit with Maori freehold land, just to give you a little bit of background. A lot of the area that we have throughout the Gisborne area is landlocked. That the areas of land are very marginal, and that the costs associated with that and the rates appropriate to that needs to have a more of a reflection. Is it appropriate? Was that the intended consequences? We do have remissions for general land for everybody, as well as Maori freehold land.
How much are unpaid rates in this town?
The terms of the unpaid rates is last was 6 and 2, was it? Yeah. There was 8 million. 8 million. That's over a 6 year. No, and that's inclusive. It's inclusive. With that's total rates with it. But going back to the other point, why there is remissions, so some of the land is worth, say, $10,000, but the rates, because we have a high UAGC, that those rates that may be per annum basis may be $1,000 per annum. So there is the quality for making sure that what we haven't created the unintended consequences for both everyone. So we have remissions with that.
A retired plumber, you've spent, well, about 10 years ago, about $3 million for the stormwater getting into the sewage around town, and you've attacked a lot of elderly people with cracks in their household drain, which I feel your side of things as far as drains goes out on the road, but you've gone around to a lot of, and they've spent thousands plus into it. And I've seen a lot of cameras with this. Your infrastructure is totally undersized. And I've also seen, especially over Kaiti, where the sewers with cameras down there, and every join, without the water, stormwater getting above there, every join, when you look down a pipe, goes down as far as you can see. But when it's raining, you can see the stormwater just coming through every join in your drain, and that is a huge, huge thing on your sewer infrastructure. And why are you attacking people's household drains where you should be looking at your own?
I think I can answer that one. So DrainWise program's looking at two-pronged approach. One's fixing private property that are adding to the issue for us. And we do have another ones where they've got their down pipes going directly into our wastewater system. Where we have issues in the network, we've got a replacement program for that running alongside parallel. So we're working to fix a lot of our drains out on the road. We've done about 80% of them now. Our upgrades now are around trying to stop the amount of rainwater that's getting into our system from people's private properties, and that's where most of the inflow is coming from at the moment, is direct inflow from residents, either their roof, or we've got real problems with gully traps or cross connections of pipes, and that's where we're seeing the biggest reductions when we make those changes.
I totally agree with that. People are putting the stormwater in, but some of the houses, because they've got roots in them and they aren't blocked, and you got to remember the council sewers are lower than the household sewers, and the water table is definitely not getting as high as theirs. But when you look down when it's raining, particularly when it's raining, the water is just hosing into the council sewers, and the poor old elderly are getting stung around for 1,000+ bills to fix unnecessary work.
We're dropping $2 million a year in fixing our pipes out on the road now. So we spend $2 million a year fixing our network out on the road to stop exactly what you're talking about. We're getting to the law of diminishing returns now, though, where we need private property to start fixing their inputs, because our network's getting close to being able to handle it, or we're fixing it as we go. So we need to stop the amount of water getting in. It's a simple water and too much for what our pipes are.
Are you putting the plastic liners down in the centre, down through the pipe?
It works for a lot of our network. Problem is,
outside pressure coming into the outside of that plastic liner, they're just going to collapse and block up.
it doesn't work for a lot of the network though, exactly as you're saying. So some of it where we can, we'll do cure in place. However, a lot of it is still old-fashioned renewals where we're digging it up and putting new lines in. So we're still having to trench. There's no way around it, particularly just the network's too flat. It hasn't got the fall in it that we need.
Plus the size.
I live out at Eastland, and I haven't heard any reason why we should be paying this stormwater or the extra stormwater charge, because that's the main thing. And number two is the proposed rates down the bottom of the letter indicates that the city people will save $3, and yet you'll tax us $1.58. So, and you still say you're not going to receive any more rates. It doesn't add up to me.
So there's two things. It reallocates. So where we saw in the early ones where the forestry was going to have increases of their rates, but others were going down. So it means if someone, we have to collect this amount of rates, but one area is going to pay for it as opposed to another. What happens with your catchment, which was where we extended the boundaries, meant that the rate, you had a new rate, you reduced some of your general rate, which was halved, but that's still not as much as what the increase that you actually had for being connected to, recognised as being connected to the city targeted rate. So there's two issues there, is saying, actually, am I receiving that service or should I be rated for it? Which is one of the questions which we are raising now as part of the submission as people coming in. And we're saying, okay, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, that connection from the city boundary will increase as per the amount of the stormwater increases out into the other areas. So that's the first part of the submission, that process. We don't collect anymore, it just means someone pays more within that catchment of ratepayers. With that going away from your rates, it will mean that those within the city will probably be around, I think we calculated, about less than $20.
We're being charged now for a service we may never get.
The proposal was to include the boundaries, but that's not, it's only a proposal. So it may, with regards to the submissions that we're hearing, that extension won't be there in this particular next set of the 3 years. But if it does increase, it will be coming back to the community and having more consultation over it.
Does anyone want any help with putting a submission in? We can help you with that here and now if you want.
Of the sewerage system that you're talking about?
If you have your own sewage system, you won't be captured as part of the targeted rate. But there is a small portion that says 10% as a general rate is applied. But if you have your own system now for the wastewater, you won't be charged.
Okay, well, that does really draw us to the end of the presentation and Q&As. Thank you for your feedback. As Fiona said, we're happy to help you make a submission now on one of our computers. Alternatively, if you want to do that in your own time, you just go onto the GDC websites up there, Let's Talk Rates, and you can do that. Again, we've talked individually about the proposed changes, but if you do get onto that Let's Talk Rates website and use that rates tool, it will have the effect or the impact the proposed changes would have on your property, essentially by those activity blocks of roading, stormwater, wastewater, and you can see at a total level whether your rates would be going up or down, because as Pauline explained, the change in the allocation with the roading, that may offset, I'm not sure how each of your properties will be impacted, but that may offset some of the changes with the proposals and the general rate with the water supply and wastewater. So that really concludes the presentation. You're welcome to stay for tea, coffee, a bickie, or if you need to go. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your concise.
Yeah, well, do you want to answer that?
It gives weight to that we don't put the original proposal. That gives weight to say, hey, this is the other alternative. That's, and the weight of the number of submissions means, okay, that gives support to that. It's only really, and at the same, putting on it, it just says, don't agree with this kind of proposal. We'll capture it, we'll capture your comments anyway, it's within. Yeah, we've got your comments, it just makes it easier if you've got the names, it gives extra weight to it. Okay. Easy, do it for you, John.
I'll put it in for you, John.
You don't have to do anything else, it's just no.
And we'd also invite you, if you'd like, to come along and speak to your submission at a hearing.
So it captures it, we'll capture what you've said and put it in.